Julia Delacroix had everything money could buy, but none of it ever touched her heart. From the polished marble floors of her family's Upper East Side penthouse to the tailored ball gowns hanging in her gold-trimmed closet, Julia's life was a shimmering cage. Everyone in her world wore masks of perfection. Every smile was rehearsed, every gesture calculated. At 23, Julia had already attended more galas and charity luncheons than she could count. She had posed for magazines, smiled beside politicians, and nodded politely at the endless stream of suitors her parents paraded in front of her, all blue-blooded, all painfully boring. But fate has a funny way of rewriting plans. It was on a rainy Thursday afternoon that Julia's world shifted. Her vintage Rolls-Royce, a birthday gift she never asked for, sputtered and died on a deserted street in Queens. Frustrated and lost, she climbed out, her designer heels sinking into the wet pavement. That's when she met Smith Carter. He was nothing like the men she knew. Grease smeared across his forearms, his jeans torn at the knees, and a battered leather jacket clinging to his broad shoulders. He looked up from under the hood of another car, his sharp blue eyes catching hers, curious, amused. "You okay there, princess?" he called, a teasing smile playing on his lips. Julia bristled. She hated the word princess. Still, she swallowed her pride. "My car died," she said, feeling absurdly helpless. Smith walked over, his boots splashing through puddles. He gave her car a quick glance. "Old beauties like this need love, not just display," he said, lifting the hood. "Mind if I take a look?" She nodded. She had no choice. He worked efficiently, his hands sure and practiced. The rain plastered Julia's silk blouse to her skin, and she shivered, watching him work, a stranger, yet somehow more real than anyone she had ever known. 20 minutes later, Smith wiped his hands on a rag and grinned. "She'll run, but she needs a real checkup. You were lucky it was just a clogged filter." "Thank you," Julia said sincerely, pulling out her phone. "Can I pay you?" Smith laughed, a rough, warm sound that made her chest ache. "Not every good deed comes with a price tag, princess." Embarrassed, she dropped her gaze. "Julia," she corrected quietly. "My name's Julia." He smiled again, softer this time. "Smith," he said. "Smith Carter." The rain eased into a soft drizzle, and somehow neither of them moved to leave. They ended up at a nearby diner, a shabby place with peeling red booths and the smell of burnt coffee, but Julia found herself more comfortable there than at any of Manhattan's five-star restaurants. Over greasy fries and lukewarm coffee, they talked. Smith told her about his life, growing up with a single mom who worked 2 jobs, dropping out of college to keep their tiny garage afloat. Julia shared pieces of her own loneliness, the crushing expectations, the feeling of being invisible even in a crowd. He listened without judgment. She spoke without filters. And when she laughed, really laughed, Smith leaned back and looked at her like she was made of starlight. "You're not what I expected," he said, shaking his head. "Neither are you," Julia replied, smiling. But life was not a fairy tale. When Julia's father, William Delacroix, found out about Smith, the consequences were swift and brutal. "You are a Delacroix," he roared in the grand library, slamming a crystal glass onto the table. "You do not associate with mechanics." Julia stood her ground, trembling but unyielding. "He's kind. He's real. That's more than I can say about anyone in this house." William's eyes darkened. Within a week, he bought out the debt-ridden garage where Smith worked and sent a lawyer to deliver a threat. "Leave Julia, or face financial ruin." Smith never told Julia. He just disappeared. No calls. No letters. Gone. Julia waited, days, weeks, her heart breaking a little more each time her phone stayed silent. Her parents said nothing, simply watched as she slowly folded back into the life they had crafted for her, quieter, sadder. 2 years later. Julia stood on the balcony of yet another gala, the cold wind tugging at her pale blue gown. Below her, the city stretched endlessly, glittering and heartless. She felt hollow, like a doll wound too tightly. "You still look like you're trying to escape," said a voice behind her. Julia froze. Slowly, she turned, and there he was. Smith. Older, sharper around the edges. His hair was shorter, his jacket replaced with a sleek black coat. But it was him, the same warm eyes, the same stubborn tilt of his mouth. "I thought you." Her voice cracked. "I had to protect you," he said simply. "Your father made sure of that." Her hands trembled. "You should have told me." "I would have left everything." "I couldn't risk it," Smith said, stepping closer. "But I'm not the same broke mechanic anymore, Julia. I own my own auto company now. Built it from scratch. No one gets to buy me off again." Tears blurred her vision. "I never cared about that." "I know," he whispered. "That's why I never stopped loving you." The city noise faded into a distant hum. Julia crossed the space between them and threw her arms around his neck. For the first time in years, she felt alive. Smith held her tightly, breathing her in like he'd been starving. "If you want out of this life, if you still want me, say the word." "I want you," Julia whispered fiercely. "Only you." They left that night. No designer gowns. No grand farewells. Just Julia, in her crumpled ball gown, and Smith, in his worn boots, disappearing into the New York night. They started small, a tiny apartment over Smith's newest garage, cheap takeout on the floor, kisses that tasted like hope. Julia worked at a local art gallery under a different name, smiling for real this time. There were struggles, yes. Nights when bills piled up. Fights about silly things. Doubts whispered by old ghosts. But beneath it all, there was love, fierce, stubborn, and breathtakingly real. They built a life that wasn't polished or perfect, but it was theirs. And every night, Julia would curl against Smith, watching the stars from their fire escape, smiling as he murmured against her hair. "See, princess. We're still under the same sky." And that was all they ever needed.